Well, I want to welcome everyone to the residency training meeting, and as we go along, please feel free to ask any questions. Our topic for today is, as most of you know, in May of last year, the Department of Labor, particularly through the Office of the Chief Accountant, came out with a survey that is done about every 6 or 7 years, and it's assessing whether CPA auditors are doing their job in auditing these retirement plans. This white paper, if you will, or review, was not very favorable, and as we go through this slide deck here, please feel free to ask any questions that you might have in relationship to it. And we're going to go through 3 phases here today. Phase number 1 is just a summary of what did they say in the review in assessing the quality of these employee benefit audits. Phase number 2 will be that they recommended in their assessment that the fiduciaries of the plan, more particularly the named fiduciaries or the responsible or we could say managing fiduciaries, come up with some kind of a checklist to go back to their CPA auditor if it was needed in the plan and ask them a few questions. So we're going to go through a checklist that Fiduciary Doctors has put together to ask CPA auditors. And before I forget, let me say that we just started earlier this year in going to see CPA auditors. We had kind of given them a free ride, shame on us, and now we're going in and taking every CPA auditor that's attached to our plans and going through a review with them. So that's the second part that we'll go into, and then the third part is the proposition that we're giving to them. And in fact, here on my desk right now was a call from a lady who is a CPA auditor for a firm in Las Vegas, and she is the auditor on a plan we have that's about $12 million and growing, maybe $13 million in Las Vegas. And I met with her when I was at the NIPA conference, which is the National Institute for Pension Administrators in Las Vegas several weeks ago. And she's calling back saying, we want to talk to you about having training, and I'll go into that and how that can help you as ministerial agents. I think you're going to be quite thrilled about it. But of course it has to be a win-win. And so as I talk to you today, there are only about 8 CPA audit firms that we have talked to so far, because we've just started this, but so far 8 out of 8 have said they're very interested in having additional training from Fiduciary Doctors. But that will be the end or the highlight of what we're going to talk about today. So let's jump right into the summary, and the white paper was about 200 pages. So in about 10, 12, 15 slides here, I'm going to summarize it, and I don't pretend to put everything in there, but I hope the more salient points I have put in there. The sampling was to look back at 2011 plan year, and again the report came out last year, so some 4 years later. And in the sampling, they looked at 400 plans out of a total of 81,162 that needed a CPA audit in 2011. Now, I must tell you that I've done a little more research on samplings, and I find that there's what we call judgment samplings, and there's what we call statistical samplings, and some of you may know those terms better than I do, but apparently looking at 400 audits out of 81,162 is considered a statistical sampling, and this represents 7,330 CPA firms. So our statistics or our data are coming from approximately 400 plans. before they got into their findings, they went in to say that ERISA, and of course the
Hey, Don.
Yes. Yes.
This is Eric. Do you have any idea how big a representation the 81,162 plans that were included in that population, what their, what representation that is of the total number of, 401k or retirement type, qualified retirement plans in the U.S.?
I don't know, and I don't believe it said that. Though I would be happy to send you the 200-page report. It doesn't jump out at me what that represented. But again, I'll be happy to send you the report. But I don't
just curious how it's representative, because I thought I heard at one point there were a lot more retirement plans. Neither here nor there. I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, the last I remember, there are approximately 900,000 retirement plans in America, and this is from memory. So if there's 81,000 that needs to be audited, is that looking at about 8%, something like that? So I think it's about 1 out of 10. But I don't remember being the report.
Yeah.
Like all DOL reports or investigations, they always start off with their power to do something, and that's just good protocol. And they start off with the fact that RISA enacted through Congress the requirement to have plans above a certain level of employees. Right now it's 115 employees that were eligible for the plan. They may not have an account balance to receive an independent, and it had to be by a CPA, audit for plan years after they had reached that certain threshold. And why was it? It was to remedy abuses on a national level, again going back to 74, for private pension plans and welfare benefit plans. And so they're going to get a little bit into these potential abuses. And then they gave their authority that the Secretary of Labor is principally responsible for enforcing fiduciary reporting and disclosures that are contained under Title I of ERISA. Of course, I'm summarizing this. Again, going back to 1974, it required an independent qualified public accountant, or they use the acronym IQPA, to do those audits. But here, they didn't bold this, but I am. They said that since ERISA in 74, and you can see this plays an important part of their white paper, and even up until now, the Department of Labor plays no role in setting the general accepted accounting principles, the GAAP, and plays no role in setting the generally accepted auditing standards, the GAAP, and that the standards are instituted completely by the accounting industry. We're going to see that they're going to make recommendations to get their hands dirty by having more of a role in setting these standards. In essence, they're saying that when we have sat by and had no role in it, we don't believe the CPA societies, state and federal, have done a good enough job, at least in their opinion. So let's jump into this. We're going to see that in their findings that they're going to say, well, 61% of CPA firms that are doing CPA audits come under either the category acceptable, meaning that they found no infractions in the work done by the CPA firm, or they could have given a grade of an acceptable with minor findings, nothing that was serious in nature, or they could have given a grade of unacceptable minor, and that in their opinion was that the deficiency noted, it was noted, in other words, they found a deficiency, but overall it was not adversarial to the plan. 61% of those 400 audits fit within acceptable, acceptable minor, or unacceptable minor, but shockingly, 4 out of 10 plans, 39% of the plans, had unacceptable and major adverse effect on the plan, to the point that it would have to be sent back and not approved as a proper CPA audit. That's pretty shocking, but it gets worse. So they start off by saying that they think one of the reasons is that there is the massive growing of CPA firms that do only limited scope audits. They only look at the financials. And they go back to 1998, and they found that there was a 23% deficiency, major deficiency, that meaning they could not accept the CPA audit. I mean, I'm shocked of that high number, but back then 52% of the audits were full scope and 48% were limited scope. But then you go to 2004, 33% of the 1 out of 3 of the audits they found had sufficient deficiencies that they could not be accepted. But note, at the same time now, nearly 60% were limited scope and only 40% were full scope. Now, they're going to draw a conclusion that that has something to do with it. By the 2014 looking at it, and that was the 2011 audits, but were published in 2015, so don't get confused by that. Now 4 out of 10, 39%, had major deficiencies, but note, only 17% of plans had full scope audits. And so they see a trend of, in fact, they, in the report, go on to say that the number of firms they look at have only done limited scope audits and have never done a full scope audit, aren't even trained to do it or have the experience. They come to some conclusions here in their report. By the way, there's several places they come to conclusions, but this is kind of the first conclusion, is that there's a clear link that exists between the number of employee benefit audits done by the CPA firm and the quality of the work. I believe the next slide will prove that. Now, this will absolutely shock you. CPA firms that performed the fewest audits, they found nearly 8 out of 10 times there were major deficiency in those audits. That just blows my mind. 8 out of 10, or maybe I should say 3/4. And then CPA firms that did the most audits, even they had a 12% deficiency, 1 out of 10. The conclusion they come to now is that these professional peer reviews that need to be done once every 3 years, and these practice monitoring that's being done by CPA firms helping each other, it has not been successful. In fact, the quality of work has not been improved, nor the identification of deficiencies in these peer reviews. That in many occasions, the peer reviewers received acceptable peer review reports, and yet there were major deficiencies in their work. Now, I have had the opportunity to talk to several peer review organizations, and I have asked them, I've said, do you believe that 4 out of 10 of no matter what the strata is of these CPA firms are turning out not just deficient work, but major deficiencies? And one of the peer organizations said, well, no, we don't believe that. And I thought, oh, okay, they're going to defend it. And they said, because we believe it's worse. And I said, oh, what are you saying? They said, we believe it's more like 60% are deficient. Now, if these numbers are correct, this is very alarming. they're going to go in and show that CPA firms that are not members of the American Institute of CPA Accountants, Employee Benefit Plan Audit Quality Center, tend to have the most deficiencies. And overwhelmingly, CPA firms with the two smallest number of plans that they audit are not members. And then the fifth point they make is training specifically targeted at these smaller firms just simply is not improving the quality of their work. So something's not working, and I think let's go to their recommendations. They're very bold. And my experience with the Department of Labor is when they make bold recommendations, they usually get their way. So, you know, take a look at, here are 9 recommendations, and I've put in darker colors, bold colors, some of the ones that are quite striking. One, they start off by saying, we've got to revise how these targeted focuses on our part are being done. Because something's not working, especially with the smaller firms. Number 2, we have got to do a better job. So they were giving themselves a pretty good spanking as well, working with national and state boards to improve the investigations and the sanctions that they are bringing upon these CPA audit firms, because, again, something's not working here. Number 3, this is in bold, we've got to amend ERISA to make sure that the annual reporting penalties no longer go back to the plan sponsor. And that's at the tune of $1,100 per day, but that the penalty goes back to the accounting firm who provided that audit. Up till now, the accounting firm, other than a bad reputation or something like that, aren't paying any penalties. And how is that plan sponsor going to know whether that audit's done correctly or not? So they say, look, we think we're fining the wrong people here. So they want to have the penalty to go to the CPA auditing firm who did it. Number 4, we have got to work with these AICPA peer review staffs to improve their process. You're going to see in a moment they give them a clean bill of health, and yet they're taking the position that that shouldn't have been a clean bill of health. Number 5, we need to audit the ERISA definition of a qualified public accountant, at least the ERISA definition of it, to include additional requirements and qualifications. They didn't say what it would be in order to improve the quality of these audits. In other words, as I read it, there would be and they didn't in any way say this, but a qualified public accountant, where we now have a certified public accountant. And when I get through, Eric, I'm interested in your comments as a former CPA auditor. Number 6, we need to amend ERISA to repeal limited scope audits and having the exemption for them. They say that those who just do limited scope give no formal or unqualified opinion, and it's too easy to just do a financial audit, limited scope only, and it does not reveal major problems in the plan that should have been addressed. I'll be interested, Eric, in your comments on that in just a few moments. Number 7, we need to amend ERISA to give the Secretary of Labor authority. Remember, I started off by saying they have no authority to establish these accounting principles and these accounting standards that will protect the integrity of the plan. Number 8, we need to expand the outreach training by individual state societies. And number 9, we need to work to encourage state boards of accountancy to require specific licensing requirements for CPAs who perform these employee benefit plans. So they're toying with having what's called a qualified public accountant, not just a certified public accountant. Now, I am going to get into the meat of their findings here in just a few moments. But Eric, well, before I ask you this, admittedly, I've only gone to about 8 CPA auditing firms, but I have shown them this, and they have all said guilty as charged. I expected them to defend it vehemently and say, this is outrageous, this isn't so. And I've started off by saying that Secretary Perez, Secretary of Labor, Thomas Perez, said that he can see no difference between a $5,000 limited scope audit and a $25,000 limited scope audit. And so I've said to them, if you had to defend your fees, could you tell, and maybe they will have said, well, we charge $13,000 minimum. Could you defend a $13,000 limited scope audit against someone who's coming in and offering to do it for $5,000? And they're saying, no, we really can't, and we've got to figure out a way to do so, or we're going to lose these plans, or the government's going to take it over. So again, I've looked at less than 10 CPA firms, but they've all said we need help. We know we do. Now, Eric, as a former CPA auditor, do you does this seem unfair? I mean, we haven't gone into the statistics yet, but does this seem unfair to you, what they're considering doing, or how's it hit you so far?
Well, Don, I guess what's surprising to me is that, so I guess the study was really going and measuring whether audits complied with the required GAAP standards, correct?
Yes, but I think, and that's why I kind of hesitated asking you the question yet, because I want to ask it to you later, but they're going to get specifically into things the CPAs aren't even looking at. So
yeah, well, that's, well,
yeah,
that's I guess the interesting part to me is that you would have such a high deficiency rate, because coming from the audit background, I thought I knew a lot about 401ks and what made them, or retirement plans, what made them effective. But when I came over to the advisor side, what I had learned is that I actually knew very little. And so what I think number 7 to me in these recommendations is probably most applicable, and that is really helping auditors understand how to increase the effectiveness of retirement plans for participants.
Yes,
because
perfect.
I think, quite frankly, I think the gas standards are out of touch with what is really going to end up truly benefiting participants, rather than just checking a box on the financial efficacy of these plans.
Great statement, and I want to show you that why I think you're right, and well, no, I must be stronger why I know you're right so far in talking to CPA firms. So let's jump a little more into this. So who's doing the audits? Well, there are 3,684 as of 2011 CPA firms who did 1 or 2 audits, and that represented 4,891 of the 81,000. Then there's 1,519 firms that are doing 3 to 5 audits, and that represented 5,773. So rounding off, almost 11,000 or 10,000 of the 81,000 were being done by firms who did less than 5. And then there were 1,600 firms that did 17,000, nearly 18,000 audits, and they did less than 25 CPA audits. And so as we go to the next slide, let's look at something that just blows my mind, and that is firms that did 1 to 2 plans, they found a 76% deficiency. Now remember what Eric just said. He thought he knew it like the back of his hand. With firms that did 3 to 5, they found nearly a 70% deficiency. With firms that did 6 to 24, they found nearly a 70% deficiency. With firms that did 99 plans, 25 to 99, that's quite a few. there was there was over a 40% deficiency, and it really didn't go down significantly until you got to firms that did over 100 to 750, and even they had a 1 out of 10 deficiency. So you have to say, you have to go back to what Eric just said. Wait, what's going on here? Well, it's even worse than that. For firms that did 1 to 2 plans, not only did they, and I'm talking about major deficiencies, not only did they have a deficiency, they had 5 or more in 6 out of 10 times. For firms that did 3 to 5 audits, not only did they have at least 1 deficiency, 42% of the time they had 5 or more major deficiencies, and on down the line here. Even though it was only 12% deficiency for plans that did 100 to 750 audits, 33% of the time in those 12% there were 5 or more deficiencies. This is pretty staggering. Now, if we look at the strata again on how often did they get a clean peer review, those, remember, they have nearly an 80% deficiency, but 52% of the time the peer review said they were clean. For those that did 3 to 5 audits, nearly 60% of the time the peer review said, hey, you're fine, you're great, keep doing what you're doing. For those that did 6 to 24, 63% of the time the peer review said, you're fine, keep doing what you're doing. Well, let's look a little further. How many of these firms were a member of the AICPA employee benefit
Hey, Don.
plan? Yes.
This is Chase. So on that last slide, that's curious to me that the more plans they did, the less they got a clean bill of health.
Well, no, they got a clean bill of health, but it turned out that it shouldn't have been a clean bill of health. Yeah. Meaning the peer review firm gave them a clean bill of health, but they found 63% of the time it shouldn't have been a clean bill of health. I think you were saying that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay.
Well, so how in the sampling, how many of these plans, these CPA firms that do 1 to 2 audits, are even a member of the AICPA employee benefit portion? Only 1 out of 10. Those that do 3 to 5, only 3 out of 10. Those that do 6 to 24, 8 out of 10. And so clearly they're coming to these conclusions, which I'll keep going on. But I want to show you now. Here's the aha. Here is what Eric just said to us. He thought he knew how to do CPA audits, but on limited scope, he had no idea. I'm not saying, I'm talking about he meaning conceptually. So where did they find the problems? Well, some they found there were auditors that weren't even CPAs. But let's just look at the other where they found the problems. That these CPA auditors didn't even know how to document internal controls. Now, I'll give you an example in just a few moments. Well, right now of an internal control that would disqualify a plan is 408B2. So as I've gone and talked to CPA auditors, I say, do you know anything about Title I of ERISA? They go, we don't even know Title I. Is there a Title II? Yeah. Well, there's Title II. Is there Title III? Yeah. Is there Title IV? Yeah. Is there a Title V? No. So no, we don't even know anything about it. Well, do you know under Title I is the internal controls of the company? And we're going to give you some examples in a moment. They go, no, we didn't know that. Well, they found some cases no audit was even performed or there was no documentation. But let's just go over ones that we would be aware of. They found that they had not documented controls of the covered service providers. That is a requirement under Title I of ERISA. They found that they had no way to confirm investments or even how to look at investments. And as we've talked to CPA auditors, they go, yeah, if you don't do a full scope, and we've never done a full scope, we don't know how to do that. They found that they didn't know how to test whether a change in the service provider was appropriate or not, or if there wasn't a change in the service provider, why not? Or they found, and I'm just highlighting these, that they had no idea how to assess specific qualifications of the service providers. Or they found that they had no way to know how to test if there were brokerage windows. Or they found there was no way to test current developments and how that affected the plan, particularly under 408B2. And I've asked them, I said, do you know what 408B2 is? No idea. Do you know that'll disqualify plan? No idea. They had no idea how to test stable value funds, or they had no evidence of whether the service agreements with the service providers were appropriate or not, or whether they were in a violation of risk. In fact, they didn't even look at the contracts. They didn't even know how to evaluate whether a participant loan or hardships was appropriate or not, or how to address rollovers, whether they're appropriate or not, or whether there'd been timely remittance of employee contributions, or if a plan decreased in value, what caused it? I mean, was it just the economy, or was it too high of? I've asked CPA auditors, or were the fees too high, or were the managers not appropriate? And there was no adequate testing of forfeitures. Now, they have no idea how to do this. And again, I've only talked to 8 firms, but I think that when, and I'll be interested in hearing, but Eric, you thought I'm not trying to, but you thought you were a pretty good CPA auditor, but did you know how to do any of these things?
The way you're trained is not, you're just not made aware of these things. These types of things are not on your radar, right?
No.
I mean, you're going in and you're testing, you're creating the financial statements for the plans, and then you're going in and you're testing things like, eligibility, making sure that the participants entered the plan correctly and that payroll was done correctly. So you're really auditing a lot of the quantitative elements, and if you've looked at a 5500, the way that we look at a plan, the financial statements are a little bit foreign to how we really look at things. So, I think it's really viewing retirement plans through completely different lenses, and I think that's probably what you're driving at here, and what the Department of Labor is driving at through this study.
Yeah. They're driving at that when they looked at the plan, no one had looked at the documentation of the covered service provider, or should that service provider have been turned over, and why weren't they? Or what about those investments? Were they appropriate for the plan? Because they're saying their intention under ERISA was full scope audits, not limited scope, and to include all of these things, and the CPA doesn't even know how to do it. So with that in mind, think of your position and what you're doing with qualified plans. And so with that in mind, we have put together,
So Don, this is Chase again. So are those items listed there, are those included in a full scope or a limited scope, or both?
Full scope, which they wouldn't be in a limited. So let me go back. So they wouldn't know. So they're feeling the heat. As I've talked to them, I've said, look, if tomorrow the government requires full scope and you must do these things, can you do them? Do you know how to do them? No, we have no idea how to do them. And
Don, I would submit that things like you're going through and looking at service provider agreements and kind of evaluating them for reasonableness. I would submit to you that even in the full scope audits, that there's really not an understanding of say what reasonableness is, right? Are the fees within reasonable range?
Well, or even to know how to test it, to even come up to some conclusion, even, that's what they're saying to me. They're saying, look, we don't know how to do this. We didn't know ERISA was, of course they all say it different ways, but we didn't know we were supposed to do all this, and even on a full scope we didn't know to do all this. And now the Department of Labor is saying, well, of course you're supposed to do it because that's the health of the plan.
Right.
And you know, and so we don't know how to do this. So with that in mind, I want to jump to.
Don, I also think, I mean, some of this is also on the IRS and the DOL in terms of, I think the best example I can give is just 408B2 and 404A5. They came out and said, hey, everybody needs to do this, but we're going to leave it up to you to figure out how you do it. And so while they give you, you need to follow this, they don't really give you direction as to, or plans as to how you're supposed to do it. So when it comes to auditors, I think they're kind of left in the dark as well, like, oh, well, maybe we don't know how to do it.
Well, no, plenty of blame to go around, and I meant to say in the beginning that in some of their early conclusions, they do say we've got to do a better job. We, the DOL, they don't bring IRS into it, and so we've got to take some of the blame ourselves. But in order to take the blame, we have to have more authority. Let me go back to this right here, because this is the most, I think, interesting thing well, maybe not most interesting, but it's way up there. And this one right here is, under ERISA, we, the Department of Labor, play no role in setting these standards. And so so they're saying, well, we've played no role long enough.
Change it.
We have got to now go in and be able to play a significant role in it, where they get into these recommendations, if you'll remember. And so
right.
We've tried it for 45 years, and leaving it just up to the CPA Society isn't working. That's kind of what I read between the lines. Well, right. I want to spend just a moment on this, because I really want to spend. So we go into CPA firms and we tell them that we are the, in fact, we'll call another one today. We are the 402 fiduciary to the plan. They don't know what that means. We explain it to them. We have them call the plan sponsor if they want to, which really is like the DOL does. They're saying we have a right to talk to you and get more personal with you. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, okay, come on by. So we take the CPA firm and we go into some general information, particularly in all this. I've sent to those in the ministerial agent role with us, and I'll send this to you as well, Eric. And so, and we've gone into who does your peer review, and you know, have you ever had any issues? And then we look it up. By the way, we don't take their word for it. And then we go into how they cross-check each other. But then we go into their fees. But here's where we really get to the meat of it. So we say, look, after we've talked about the Department of Labor's findings, we say, now, let's take an example here. Under Form 5500, Schedule G, Part 3, non-exempt transactions, we'd already mentioned to you that a plan can be disqualified for 408B2. Do you look at that? Do you know what it means? No, we've never even heard of the code section. Okay, so then we'd put a no there. And then, has your firm ever received any training on targeted hits by the DOL? And they go, well, what does that mean? We go, well, one of the owners of Fiduciary Doctors spent 26 years at Department of Labor, and it's not contraband. But there are formulas. It's called Program 57. I don't know anything about it. I've never been at the DOL as an employee, but it's a formula of when they're going to audit a plan. Have you ever had any training in that? No, golly, didn't know anything about it. Well, let's talk about internal controls, because clearly the Department of Labor is wanting to know, have you looked at ERISA 404C? Do you know what that means? No, we don't. ERISA 411. Have you looked at the investment policy statements, if there is one, and if it's appropriate, etc.? What about the retirement plan committee meetings or PAC meetings? Do you look at that? No, we don't. Do you look at the efficiency of the expenses or the quality of the investments, or what kind of training? Did you know that 4 out of the 9 regional offices of the Department of Labor are requiring proof of fiduciary training to the retirement committee? Oh, we didn't know that. Well, have you trained anything on the safety of the plan for using fiduciaries? Do you know that 96% of all plans have non-fiduciaries, and the whole plan is made up of the service providers are non-fiduciaries? Do you know how to help the plan select a 402 fiduciary or a 316 or a 403 or a 321A II or 338 or a 408G? Golly, no, we don't know how to do that. We say, well, we're going to keep you as the CPA auditor on this plan, but unless we can see that you're going to expand your audit, we're going to have to release you as the CPA auditor of the plan. And we're not trying to pull any muscle on you, but we're the fiduciary of the plan. We've got to do this. Oh, hey, what do we need to do? So then we jump into this. We say, well, now look, there's hope here. And we always have their firm here, and we say, you know, and everyone have done this so far. They either say by now, no, we're not doing it, or they have said by now, we're afraid government's going to take it over, or they've said by now, we think we're afraid to lose the plan, or they've said by now they can't really support that $12,500 fee, and to say why it's any better than a $5,000 fee. So they're pretty humble and contrite by now. And so we say, well, look, we do need to do our job, and so we do need to, if you don't get training from us, you need to get training somewhere. So here's what we're going to suggest to you, and you can go somewhere else to get it if you want to. You've got to move your business from being a commodity to being customized so that you can not have people take plans away from you, so that you can justify your fees, and so that you can go get other plans. It's really that simple. And so in order to move from being a commodity to customize, you have 3 key ingredients here. You have to be different. And are you different from another CPA firm? No, and they've always said, no, we're really not. Are you meaningfully different? Well, no. And are you even rare? Does it really matter whether someone goes to you? Well, we don't know how to prove it. So I said, well, if you don't mind giving an example here, let's talk about fiduciary doctors. How are we different? We're an independent professional ERISA 402, ERISA 402 named fiduciary, and ERISA 316 plan administrator. I said, how many companies in America do you think, would you guess, even say they do this? And they go, golly, we don't know. We never heard of anyone. We said, well, there's actually about 4. But 4 isn't very many, is there? And they go, no, that's pretty different. Well, what about meaningfully different? Well, the hottest ticket in ERISA today is Title I. You can see by the report. Everything they're mentioning in the report is Title I material, not Title II. And it's going to be around for a long time. So the action's in Title I, and you're spending time in Title II, which is the 5500. And then lastly, why are we rare? There's really no firm that does what we do. We'll show you how we do it. So you just answer, this is rhetorical. You as a firm, are you different? You're probably going to say no. Are you meaningfully different? No. Then are you rare? No. Well, let's work with you to do 3 things. 1, teach you how to find 408B2 for the Schedule G Part 3 of the audit, of the 5500 audit. Let's train you on how to look for targeted hits from the DOL. And then let's train you under Title I to look for Title I weaknesses under these areas. What will that do for you? Well, it'll allow you to become different, meaningfully different, and rare. And what does that equate into? Well, more fees, less moving of clients to a competitor. You'll be a tremendous help to the plan sponsor and plan fiduciaries. You'll find a new way to market. You'll even find it fun to do, and you'll no longer be a commodity. How do you feel about that? And I mean, now, you know, CPA auditors aren't, you know, they're not the most boisterous party you're ever going to go to. But they have said, wow, this is what we've been looking for. We were a little hesitant of you coming by today, and usually they have a senior partner in there because they know who we are. And so they go, wow. So we say, look, let's suggest how to help you. One, if you have other partners, talk to them regarding what we talked about today. Two, let us know if your firm wants to explore some new ideas and training. Three, then let's set a meeting and brainstorm how to do it. Then four, let's set up a meeting for us to train you on these Title I issues. Then you, as a CPA, when you go out and ask for material to do your audit, all you have to do is add in some Title I things that you haven't asked for before. Just say, we also want this, this, and this, and we've got a form for you. Then when you get the form, you'd let them know that an independent fiduciary firm is going to review these issues here, right here, to see if there's deficiency in them, and if so, how to take care of them. Then we will give our report back to you, and you can present it to the plan sponsor or their PAC committee. Hopefully we can go with you, and then if the client wants to bring on us as an independent fiduciary, it's locked you into them more, and in training them, we will, once we have worked with you for a while and you know how to do these things right here, then we'll recommend you to plans that to plans that need a CPA audit, and the competitor isn't doing it. So all we want to do is teach you how to do Title I of ERISA. And that, not teach you how to do it, teach you how to recognize it. And then how to recognize the deficiency. So think now, when you go out to say to someone, we would love to become your CPA auditor. And oh, by the way, we don't just do Title II of ERISA, which we'll train you on, but we go into all these other issues that the Department of Labor looks at on an audit. And that gives you much more protection. And oh yes, we're $5,000 more a year more than you can get somewhere else, but we do Title I and Title II. So that's basically what we're doing with every CPA auditor that we have under our system. And we're being nice, but we're saying if they are not going to increase that audit scope, then we, representing the client as the 402, won't be able to stay with them. So let me just turn it back to you all. Does this conceptually make sense to you? Can you see the value added that can be brought to these plans? Your comments, in other words, at this point.
Sorry, Don, I was on mute. Oh, well, yeah, immediately. You know, when you really look at the, what should I say, the gap that we're trying to fill here, as you know, we're fiduciary advisors. You know, you're the 402, and you know, there's definitely still a gap even between what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do, and then you have the auditors coming in, and you know, just by the definition of an auditor, you would think that all of these things would be followed up on and covered within an audit.
Yeah.
So I would think that just from a, we'll say a, not taking into account any auditing standards or any of that kind of thing, but from a common law belief of what an audit should be about, and if you were to go out and ask a plan sponsor what their audit is covering, I would think that a typical plan sponsor would think these things are being looked at by their auditor.
Yeah, yeah. And look at the position Fiduciary Doctors is in, because this is what we do. And as we join hands with those CPA auditors and have them go out and ask for these things, then the conclusion will be you're not getting done in your plan what needs to be done, and you're one of that 96% or whatever that is not going to get a CPA audit. Now, the Department of Labor has been very clear that if you're just going in and looking at the financials and you're not looking at these things, then you have a deficient audit, a major deficient audit, and they will reject it. So look at the opportunity. You two don't know each other, but I will tell you that you are so unusual in how you approach your portion of the business that, well, less than 1% of plans have a 338 investment manager. Less than 1%. So you're already in the 1 percentile. Less than 5% of plans have 321A II fiduciaries. So now you combine it with then doing the other part of Title I of ERISA. It's just so exciting. Well, that's our training for today. We'll